The year was 1865, and the wind carried with it the bitter taste of ash and dust across the Colorado Territory. The land stretched wide and merciless, mountains rising like jagged teeth in the distance, prairies burned brown by drought, and trails littered with the bones of wagons and beasts that had failed the journey. It was a place of hunger and grit, where men killed for a pair of boots and women carried sorrow in silence. Out here, no law ruled but survival, and death walked as close as a man's own shadow. She came stumbling along the wagon track with two children clutched against her sides, their faces hollow, their cheeks smeared with dirt and grief. Her shawl, once a pale blue, had been torn to rags by wind and weather. Her boots were nearly soleless, each step cutting her feet until blood darkened the earth behind them. Yet she kept on, eyes fixed on the crude outline of a trading post at the fork of the trail, the one place where she prayed mercy might be bought with tears. The boy, scarcely 6, dragged his feet and coughed with dry rasp that spoke of days without water. His sister, not yet 4, whimpered softly, her small body cradled in the crook of her mother's arm. The woman's lips cracked as she whispered encouragement, though her throat burned with the same thirst. Just a little further, darlings, just a little further, and we'll find bread. She told herself those words as much as she told them. When the post came into clear sight, her heart pounded not from relief but dread. Rough voices carried on the wind, men laughing, shouting, the scrape of boots against wood. She stopped at the edge of the yard where horses were tied, their sides caked with dust. Her hands trembled as she shifted the girl to her hip and gripped the boy's hand tighter. "Stay close," she murmured. The trading post door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sour stink of whiskey. Lantern light flickered over unshaven faces turned her way, eyes narrowing at the sight of her and her little ones. Men leaned on the bar, voices low and clipped, the scrape of spurs sharp against the boards. The place smelled of suspicion of deals made in shadows. She swallowed hard and stepped forward, her voice breaking as she pleaded, "Please, my children haven't eaten in 2 days. Could you spare bread, a little milk, anything at all?" The merchant behind the counter, a barrel-bellied man with greasy hair plastered to his scalp, leaned back and spat tobacco juice into the corner. His lip curled. "No one wants a woman with baggage, especially 2 hungry mouths," he sneered, his voice carrying so all could hear. Laughter followed, cruel and sharp. One man barked, "Best you try the brothel in Julesburg. Plenty there'll feed you for a price." Her cheeks burned as heat rose in her chest, shame prickling her skin. She hugged her children closer, wishing she could vanish through the floorboards. The boy buried his face in her skirt. The little girl began to cry, soft sobs muffled against her mother's shoulder. But the cruelty did not stop. A drunk near the stove rose unsteadily, eyes glittering mean. "Ain't she a pretty one, under all that dirt? Don't waste her here. Boys." He staggered closer, reaching for her arm. She jerked back, her voice sharp with terror. "Stay away." The drunk laughed, but his hand kept reaching. Then came the sound that cut through every breath in the room, the click of a rifle cocking. "Get out." The voice was low, gravel dragged across stone. Every man turned toward the corner, where a figure had been sitting in shadow. He rose now, tall and broad-shouldered, his frame wrapped in a buffalo hide coat, beard flecked with gray. His eyes, hard as river stones, fixed on the drunk. He did not repeat himself. He didn't need to. The drunk froze, muttered a curse, and backed off toward the stove. The man lowered the rifle, but didn't put away. He stood there like a mountain come to life, silent but unmovable. The room's laughter died, replaced by a sullen hush. The woman stood trembling, unsure if she'd been rescued or simply drawn into another kind of danger. The stranger stepped forward, his boots thudding heavy against the planks. Without a word, he passed her by, went to the counter, and set a pouch of coins down. Bread, dried meat, milk. His voice carried no warmth, only command. The merchant hesitated, but obeyed. Soon, a bundle was placed in the woman's arms, the smell of food filling her nose, so sharp it made her dizzy. Her children reached eagerly, and she broke bread with shaking hands, giving them each a piece. The boy ate like a wolf. The girl smeared milk across her chin, swallowing with desperate gulps. Tears welled in the mother's eyes, blurring the sight of them eating. She turned toward the stranger, her lips trembling. Why help us? He met her gaze without flinching. World don't care what it wants, he said quietly. But I ain't leaving you here. Her knees buckled with the weight of it all, grief and relief clashing until sobs broke free. She clutched her children, her words spilling out between gasps. No one wanted a mother carrying 2 orphans. No one. The mountain man's eyes softened, if only for a flicker, before his face closed again like a shutter. He glanced around the room where men still watched, hatred simmering in their stares. Trouble was thick in the air. He turned back to her. This place ain't safe. You're coming with me. She stiffened, suspicion rising. I don't even know your name. Don't need it. Not yet, he replied. His tone left no space for argument. He handed her the bundle and started toward the door. For a moment she thought of refusing. But the weight of her daughter in her arms, the hollow look in her son's eyes, and the memory of the drunk's hand reaching toward her, all these things chained her choice. With her heart hammering, she gathered her children and followed. Outside, the sky had darkened with the promise of rain, clouds rolling low over the peaks. Horses stamped and snorted at the post rail. The man mounted a tall bay gelding, then glanced down at her. Can you ride? I can try, she whispered. He reached down, hauled her up with one arm as though she weighed no more than a sack. The children clung to her sides as he urged the horse forward, leaving behind the flickering lights and whispers of the trading post. They rode into the wilderness, the trail swallowed by shadows. The night air cut sharp against her skin, smelling of pine and storm. Behind them, laughter rose faintly from the post, fading with each hoofbeat until it was only the sound of the wind. The woman clutched her children close, heart torn between fear of the man whose name she did not know and gratitude for the food that filled her children's bellies. Every breath felt borrowed, yet something in the rhythm of his silence, in the steadiness of his back as he rode, whisper of safety she hadn't known since before the war stole her husband and burned her homestead to the ground. The trail wound higher into the dark hills, moonlight breaking through clouds to silver the rocks. He rode without pause, eyes forward, rifle strapped at his side. She studied him through the veil of night. The set of his shoulders, the scars along his hands, the quiet weight of a man who had lost more than he'd ever say. At last, when the children sagged into sleep against her, the man drew rein by a stream. He dismounted, lifted them down gently, and started a fire with practiced ease. Flames caught, crackling bright against the night. She laid her daughter beside her brother, covering them with her ragged shawl. Their breathing grew steady, untroubled for the first time in days. The man sat across from her, sharpening his knife by firelight, eyes never lifting. She swallowed, her voice soft. Why risk yourself for us? You don't even know our names. Steel scraped against stone, the only sound for a long while. Then, without looking up, he answered, Names don't matter. What matters is you won't make it alone. World's too cruel for that. She hugged her knees, eyes wet. The fire's glow flickered across her face, catching the lines of exhaustion, of stubborn will. For the first time since she'd buried her husband in a shallow grave, she felt the faintest thread of hope. The night deepened, stars breaking through as clouds drifted away. The fire crackled steady, and though the wilderness pressed close, she did not feel entirely alone. She watched the stranger, his silhouette solid against the fire, and knew her story had changed the moment he rose from that shadowed corner of the trading post. And so, beneath the wide, merciless sky, a mother, her 2 orphans, and the mountain man began a journey none of them had chosen, but all of them now had survived. The wilderness gave no welcome. It pressed against them with every step, with every turn of the trail, reminding them that mercy had no place in these mountains. Dawn broke pale and cold, painting the ridges in gray light, the trees whispering like old mourners in the wind. The woman held her children close on the saddle, her eyes half-lidded from weariness. Her heart split between dread of the stranger who led them and the dread of being left behind. The mountain man rode steady, his silence as heavy as a rifle across his back, his gaze sweeping the terrain with vigilance born of years alone out here. The river came into view before midday, swollen from storms upriver, its waters churning and frothing white. The boy stirred awake, his lips dry, and whispered, "Mama, I'm thirsty." She hushed him, though her own throat burned, her eyes darting toward the water with a desperate longing. The man swung down, tying his horse's reins to a branch, and studied the current. His face betrayed nothing, but the set of his jaw told of the truth. This crossing could kill them. "We'll make it," he said at last, voice low, like he was speaking to himself more than her. He waded into the water first, boots sinking into the mud, the river pushing hard against his thighs. When he returned, drenched but steady, he lifted the girl into his arms. "Hold her tight. Don't let go." The mother obeyed, sliding into the river after him, clutching her daughter so close she felt the child's heartbeat against her ribs. The boy clung to her skirt, his small face pale with fear. The current struck like a living thing, pulling at her legs, shoving her downstream. She gasped, water rising to her waist, the weight of the child dragging her down. "I can't," she cried, panic claw in her throat. The man was already there, his arm like iron as he seized her, pulling both mother and child forward, step by step. His body blocked the current, his strength an anchor against the wild force of the river. They stumbled onto the far bank, collapsing into the wet grass. The boy sobbed, his little chest heaving, while the girl whimpered softly against her mother's neck. The man said nothing. He only drew his knife and cut branches, fashioning a quick fire to warm them. As the flames caught, she met his eyes, breathless. "You saved us." "Not yet," he muttered. "Road's long." They rested by the fire until the children's shivering eased. The woman studied him in the flickering light. His hands were scarred, knuckles swollen from old fights. His face, weather-beaten and stern, looked carved from the same stone as the ridges surrounding them. But beneath that hardness was something else, something she couldn't name yet. That night they camped in a clearing ringed by pines, the stars sharp above them, cold as steel. The children huddled together beneath the shawl, already asleep. The man sat with his back to a log, rifle across his knees, sharpening a knife with slow, deliberate strokes. The steady rasp filled the silence. Then came the sound, low, guttural, close. The growl cut through the dark. The fire hissed as the wind shifted, and in its light she saw the shadow moving at the edge of the clearing. The man was already on his feet, rifle raised. The bear lumbered into view, its eyes glinting, its massive shoulders swaying as it advanced. It had smelled their food, and hunger made it bold. The woman's breath caught, her arms flying around the children. The beast's growl deepened, echoing in her chest like thunder. The man fired. The crack shattered the night. The bear reared, bellowing, and charged. The woman screamed. The man dropped his rifle, drew his knife, and met the beast head-on. The struggle was furious, brutal, primal. The bear swiped, claws tearing cloth and flesh, but the man drove the blade deep again and again until the beast crashed onto its side, groaning its last. Silence followed, broken only by the ragged pull of his breath. The woman's heart pounded so hard it seemed to echo in the clearing. He stood there in the glow of the fire, blood streaking his coat, his chest heaving, knife black in the light. She whispered, almost in disbelief, "You killed it." He turned toward her, face unreadable. "Or it killed me. Could have gone either way." He stooped, tore strips from his shirt, and bound the gashes on his arm with the same calm he'd used to cut branches earlier. He did not complain. He did not wince. The children peeked from beneath the shawl, wide-eyed, watching him like he was something more than a man. The boy asked softly, "Will it come back?" "No," the stranger said. He glanced at the carcass, then added, "Not this one." Morning brought a strange calm. The children rose early, chasing each other in the meadow while their mother watched, the sound of their laughter both foreign and healing. The man squatted near a fallen log, showing the boy how to whittle a stick into a point. The boy's small hands trembled, but his eyes lit with wonder at each shaving that curled away. The little girl toddled over and fell asleep against the man's side, her tiny head resting on his coat. For a moment the woman stared, her throat tight, struck by the sight of her children finding comfort in the arms of a stranger. She had forgotten what warmth looked like, but peace was short-lived. By noon, he found tracks in the mud, horses, 5 or 6, heading the same direction they were. His eyes narrowed. Riders. Her breath hitched. Raiders? Maybe, he said. Maybe worse. Stay close. They left the meadow, moving fast, the man leading them off the trail into the trees. Branches scratched at her arms, the ground treacherous with roots and stones, but she kept up, clutching her children. He moved with the surety of a wolf, silent, always scanning the ridges above. Then came the distant sound of hooves. She froze, clutching her children tight, her heart leaping. The man turned, pressed a finger to his lips, and pulled them into a thicket of spruce. They crouched low, breath shallow. Through the branches, she saw them. 5 riders, rifles strapped, faces shadowed beneath wide brims. Their laughter rang out as they passed, cruel and careless, a sound that turned her blood cold. The man waited until the last echo of hooves faded, then motioned them out. His jaw was tight, his voice even. They'll be back this way. Need to keep moving. Fear gnawed at her as they pressed deeper into the wilds, the children growing heavy in her arms, her legs trembling with each step. Yet the man moved as though the land itself carried him. When they finally paused near a creek at dusk, her body nearly collapsed from exhaustion. He set snares with quiet efficiency, gathered wood, and built another fire. As the flames grew, the woman sank to the ground beside her children. She wanted to thank him, to ask who he was, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she whispered, almost to herself, "Why would a man like you care if we lived or died?" For a long while, he said nothing. Then, without looking at her, he answered, "Ain't about caring. It's about right. Men out here, most lost that. Don't mean I have to." She studied him across the fire, the shadows cutting sharp lines across his face. There was sorrow in his eyes, buried deep but not gone. She felt it like a mirror of her own grief. The night deepened. Snowflakes drifted from the sky, melting as they touched the flames. The children slept, curled together beneath the shawl. The woman pulled it tighter around them, her heart swelling with a mix of fear and gratitude she could not untangle. She glanced at the man again. He sat unmoving, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the firelight, his hand resting on his rifle. For the first time, she realized he wasn't simply leading them through the wilderness. He was standing guard, keeping death itself at bay. And in that cold, star-scattered night, with wolves howling somewhere far off, she felt a flicker of something she had not known since her husband's death. The faint, dangerous whisper of hope. The storm gathered over the ridges like a great black curtain, swallowing the sky as they pressed on. The air was sharp, heavy with the promise of rain and thunder, and the woman felt her children cling tighter to her, their small hands gripping her worn dress. The mountain man rode ahead, his eyes narrowed against the wind, every line of his face hardened with vigilance. He had led them through rivers, through beasts, through shadows of men in pursuit, but she knew in her bones the greatest test still lay before them. The frontier did not let its prey go easily. By late afternoon, the canyon walls closed in, high cliffs on either side rising like prison bars. The horse's hooves echoed off the stone, a hollow sound that set her nerves trembling. The boy pressed his cheek into her side, whispering, "Mama, I don't like it here." She hushed him, though she shared the same fear. The man ahead slowed, his hand never straying far from the rifle strapped across his back. He knew danger well enough to sense it before it showed its teeth. It showed them soon enough. The sound of hooves burst from the canyon mouth, and 5 riders swept in like wolves, their rifles glinting, their laughter sharp. She gasped, clutching her children close. The man wheeled his horse, rifle already raised. His voice was steel. "Get down!" She dropped to the ground, pulling the children with her as the first shot cracked. Stone chipped beside her head, dust stinging her eyes. The man fired back, his movements quick, precise, born of long practice. A rider toppled from his horse, but the others pressed closer, bullets whining against rock. The canyon erupted in chaos. Horses screamed. Men shouted. Smoke stung her nose. She pulled her children behind a boulder, heart pounding so loud it drowned the thunder building overhead. Through the haze, she saw one of the raiders break away, riding hard toward her hiding place. He swung down, his face twisted with cruel grin, and before she could scream, he had the boy by the collar, yanking him upright. The boy shrieked, arms flailing. "Mama!" Her blood turned to fire. She surged forward, seizing a stone from the ground, and struck the raider across the head. He cursed, stumbling, but his grip held. She clawed and bit, the desperation of a mother unchained. He raised his hand to strike her down, then a rifle roared. The raider jerked, eyes wide, and collapsed in the dust, her son tumbling free. She threw herself over him, trembling, as the mountain man strode into view, smoke curling from his barrel. There was no time to thank him. Another shot rang out. He ducked, rolled, returned fire, dropping a third rider from saddle. The canyon thundered with echoes of death. The last two raiders, seeing their numbers broken, turned tail and galloped for the ridge, curses trailing in their wake. Then came the silence, heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of storm. The man lowered his rifle, chest heaving. His coat was torn, his arm bleeding anew. The woman gathered her children, pressing her lips to their hair, her whole body trembling with relief and fury. She turned on him, voice shaking. "Why? Why save us? You could have left us to die and been free of us long ago." His eyes met hers, and for the first time they were not stone but grief itself, raw and unhidden. His voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. "I lost my own once. Wife, child, couldn't keep him safe. Bear him under snow so deep the wolves couldn't dig. Been alone since. Maybe this is my chance to make it right." Her breath caught, tears brimming. She saw then not just the strength that had carried them, but the wound that had carved him hollow inside. He had not chosen them for charity. He had chosen them because he could not bear to lose another family to the cruelty of the frontier. The storm broke as they left the canyon, rain slashing down, lightning tearing the sky. The trail turned to mud, the horse laboring through the muck. The children whimpered, soaked and shivering. She wrapped them as best she could, her own body a shield. The man pressed on, his face set against the storm, guiding them with unyielding resolve. At last, long past dusk, they crested a ridge. Below lay a valley, sheltered by pines, smoke curling faint from a chimney. A cabin stood there, rough-hewn but solid, its windows glowing with the soft promise of firelight. Her breath caught at the sight. The man's voice rumbled low. "Home." He led them down, steady and sure, until they reached the door. He swung down, lifted the children first, then helped her dismount. The ground beneath her boots felt unreal, as if she stood in a dream. The cabin door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a single room warmed by a blazing hearth, shelves lined with jars, furs hanging from the beams. It was no palace, but to her eyes it was sanctuary. The children darted inside, their laughter echoing as they explored. The boy touched every shelf, every chair, while the girl crawled onto a pile of blankets near the fire. Their faces glowed in the light, hunger and fear forgotten for the moment. The woman stepped across the threshold last, her hand trailing the frame. She whispered the word as though it might vanish if spoken too loud. "Home." He moved about the cabin with quiet efficiency, stoking the fire, setting water to boil, cutting strips of venison to cook. She watched him, her heart swelling with emotions she could not name. Gratitude, grief, fear, hope. She did not trust herself to speak. When the food was ready, he served the children first. They ate greedily, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. She ate next, each bite both a blessing and a burden, reminding her of all the empty nights that had come before. He ate last in silence, his gaze never straying far from the door, as though expecting the world to snatch away what they had just found. Later, when the children slept curled on the blankets, their breaths soft and steady, she sat near the fire, hands folded in her lap. He sat across from her, shadows flickering across his face. She found her courage at last, her voice trembling but strong. "What happens now?" He studied her for a long while before answering. "Now, You live. Kids grow. This place, it'll keep you if you let it. Ain't much, but it's safe. Her eyes brimmed. Safe. The word felt foreign, fragile. She looked at her children, then back at him. And you? What of you? His gaze softened, though his voice stayed rough. Reckon I've been walking alone long enough. The fire crackled between them, its warmth filling the silence. She felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the fear that had bound her, a stirring of strength she thought gone forever. He had carried them through hell, but here in this cabin, she understood that survival was not just about strength of arms. It was about choosing to hold one another when the world said to let go. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and steady, blanketing the valley in white. The fire burned bright, the walls holding fast against the storm. Inside, the mountain man, the mother, and her two orphans sat together, not by blood but by choice, bound by the scars of loss and the fragile, stubborn hope of beginning again. And so the story closed not with silence, but with the sound of children's laughter, the crackle of fire, and the heartbeat of a home forged in the fiercest crucible the frontier could offer. What do we take from this tale? Perhaps this, that the frontier did not just build cabins or carve trails through wilderness. It built families out of broken souls, binding them with threads stronger than blood. And maybe, in a land where death walked close, that was the truest kind of survival. If this story has stirred something in you, don't let it end here. Share it, speak it, carry it forward. And if it moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments.